please welcome our next presenters, and I'll let them take it from here.
Thank you, Roy. And I also wanted to mention that we also have another presenter with us as well, Sam. He's going to also present with us today. All righty. Okay, so thank you, everybody. My name is Laryn O'Donnell Knudson. I am an occupational therapist and an assistant teaching professor at Northern Kentucky University. And I have with me Dr. Jen Kaiser here, and Sam is also on the meeting, and then Jessica Shields. All right, so today we're going to talk about something called the KoreBalance 19 system and how it can be used in the community setting. We're going to talk about some user experiences and the role of the administrator in using the KoreBalance 19. We are going to talk about some of the research that we have conducted as a team. Can I see there's... Oh, you see my presenter notes. Okay, let's see here. How do I... So sorry about that. Let's see here. I'll just switch the screens. Okay, do you see them now?
No, you're good. Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for letting me know. All right, and then lastly, we're going to talk about implications for future research and clinical practice. Okay, so this is obviously a review for a lot of you, given your knowledge with geriatrics and balance, but just as a quick summary, falls are the leading cause of injury and death in older adults. Loss of balance it leads to loss of independence and decreased participation with this population specifically. And with prevention of falls, this must reach beyond the clinic. So that is why we sought to interact with community members. And there are a lot of emerging technologies out there, and these technologies may provide early detection and objective data in seeking to prevent falls in this population specifically. We also wanted to note that with balance, it is multidimensional. There is the physical component, the cognitive component, and the psychological component. So with the physical component, we think of, standing, and then the psychological component too, we're going to talk about in a little bit, fear of falling in a study that we did with that. And then we're also going to talk about the proprioceptive component and vestibular component as well. And so this is actually shown in some of the balance tests that have been used in history. So postural stability, so utilizing balance boards and force plates, assessing that proprioception and individual's balance. There are some balance tests for assessing the neurological component of balance. So with their vision specifically, how does their balance compare when they're able to see and or when their vision is occluded? Vestibular, looking at the balance specifically to see if the vestibular system is impacted by a previous neurological disorder. And then physiological, looking at the individual from a musculoskeletal standpoint, their strength and joint function. So these balance tools were created around the mid-20th century and have been used for assessing balance in a quantitative and objective way, just so that we can better understand how balance impacts individuals who are aging, or older adults, rather. So this leads me to talk about KoreBalance 19. So this is an image of the system. It is an instrumented balance assessment and training system. It uses a stability platform and accelerometers to measure static and dynamic balance. So with this, you can see that there is a stability platform. The accelerometers are within the platform, and there's a screen here, which is how you operate the machine, looking at how you can conduct that baseline testing, static and dynamic testing, and games as well. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. This machine has been found in clinical settings, assisted living facilities, recreation centers, health and fitness clubs, universities, and professional sports teams. This is according to the KoreBalance company themselves. And so we were so lucky to collaborate with a local senior center with Jessica Shields and look at how this machine can be utilized in a community-based setting. So it's at a senior center with community dwelling older adults. So individuals that are mobile throughout the community. They're not homebound. They're actively seeking socialization, different activities. And so this was our population focus. And for these individuals to be able to utilize the KoreBalance, they had to be a member of the senior center. So there was individuals who heard about the machine, but they were only able to utilize it if they were a member of the senior center. So you have to be aged 60 and older, and you have to have a physician approval, and then the cost is free. So this is the population focus, which leads us to looking at the machine more specifically. So here is Jessica, and she's going to talk about the machine.
This is the KoreBalance. This is the main screen. So the first thing we do when people are brand new, we do our testing. We do a balance baseline test. This test does static eyes open, static eyes closed, and then dramatic circle, which kind of reflects on reaction time. After we take those tests, we can pull up the results and we go over the results with our people so they can see where they fall on the fall risk, if they're high, low, and average. And we go through everything explaining to them. After they get tested, we obviously get to play games with them. So some of the games that we can
Would it be possible to increase the audio?
Training, which is just eyes open, eyes closed. We can change the time from 30 seconds up to a minute if we want. We can do hands-on, hands-off. We can practicing following the red ball, which works on a reaction time. We can change directions. We can change shapes. We can change the size. Again, we can do this hands-on, hands-off, and change the time limit from 30 seconds to a minute. Now, in our facility, everyone likes going straight to the games. We offer 8 games that they can play right now. Tux Racer is probably the favorite game. That's a skiing game where you have to ski downhill and get fish. Never ball, there is a bullseye. You got to work your way to the bullseye. The scale is just learning to balance your right and your left. Core maze is just working your way through a maze, trying not to hit the walls as you're working through. Mad Bomber, the guy throws stuff at you, you gotta catch it. Never Putt is a golf game. It's pretty hard, so we don't do that one too often. Papa Dot, you're chasing a red ball around the course. And SD Elbow is another reaction time, working on right and left, and you're catching the ball and sending it up, knocking out the pitcher in the sun. But this is what our clients like to do every day.
All right. And Sam, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, absolutely. Just had to get my mic on there. As Laryn said, my name is Sam Krebs. I am a sophomore student at Northern Kentucky University. I am exercise science and pre-physical therapy, as well as Dr. O'Donnell and Dr. Kaiser's research assistant on the KoreBalance. On top of that, I am a KoreBalance coach with Jesse over at the Campbell County Senior Center. So I'm kind of dabbled all around in the KoreBalance. So to give you guys sort of what it feels like or what it looks like to use the KoreBalance, we obviously have our user and our administrator. Jesse and I are the administrators. We will guide the user through the games and direct them through what they need to be doing based on what we saw from their baseline test. We are going to recommend games based on their skill set. We are going to set goals within those games, and we're going to overall create a plan of action for what we're going to do. We can go on to the next slide here. So here's kind of just a breakdown of all the pieces. Obviously, we have the screen. We also have the safety belt that is kind of locking you into the device, as well as the handrails for support. On our foot plate at the bottom, we have lines on there to show where you're supposed to be standing. Some people with bigger feet should stand at a 10. Other people should stand at a 6. Your arches are supposed to go across the KoreBalance line right down there. So obviously very safe. It allows people of this older population to work on their balance without the fear of falling or having any injuries. We can move on to our next slide. So this is what our balance baseline test looks like. Jesse sort of touched on it in the video, but we take 3 tests. There is an eyes open test, an eyes closed test, and then the dynamic test where you're trying to follow the ball around the circle. Each of these tests are 30 seconds, and it is calculated by the distance from the the crosshair. That's how it gives you your fall risk. And there is a graph on the next slide so we can look at this. But within this is how Jesse and I we're going to give directions based on how they do on this. So if you look at our graphs up at the top, this is in comparison to 200 Medicare patients over the age of 65. The bottom graph is one individual's first test on the KoreBalance when they first started it. As you can see, they fall into that high risk category with the red line. After doing the KoreBalance for about 4 months, they have dropped dramatically into the average, which is that yellow line up there. So as Jesse said, these are all of our games. Each game uses a variety of different skills. A lot of the things that we're working on are tasks like being able to shift your weight or proprioception or reaction time or things like that. I often start with the core maze with most of the people that I'm doing it with. That's something that kind of works on all of these skills. You can revisit it a lot and see, okay, maybe I'm shifting my weight better, or maybe I saw this coming, so I was better prepared. Having all of these different options allows us to treat what the user can and cannot do, so we can be very, very intentional with our goals. So using our example of the core maze, as I said earlier, that picture right there is what the first maze looks like. Obviously, you are not necessarily leaning, but shifting your weight on the plate to make the ball roll around the maze to get to the center. I had someone recently, about a month ago, they started their first attempt on the core maze. They took 100 seconds to complete the maze, which is definitely below average for our population. They struggled shifting their weight. When they would go, it would be a dramatic shift. They wouldn't be able to tell when the openings were coming. So there was a lot going on there. Just recently, this was about a month later, they did it again and they got 60 seconds, which is a dramatic increase. This is definitely a higher, better than average time on the core maze. This is reflecting their progression with being able to shift their weight and being able to know when there's turns coming, which is important that they can tell what they're doing. We had a vestibular case recently where someone was diagnosed with MS, and they were using the KoreBalance to, you know, get a little bit of a head start just so they could retain as much balance as they could, which they did find some improvement. But then once they revisited their doctor, they found out that they do not have MS. They just had gray matter on their brain, which, as we know, is common in most older folks. And with the combination of PT, Tai Chi, KoreBalance, and everything that the Senior Center has been able to offer, they have dropped their fall risk exponentially. Move on to our next slide here. So yeah, talking about the intentional goals, we want to break down these games into what can we do to make you, or to better your skills, to hone in these skills so that we can reduce your fall risk. For example, the Tux Racer penguin game is focused on catching fish. You have to catch a certain amount of fish in a certain amount of time. Obviously, not everybody is necessarily ready to do that from the start. So a lot of times I will break down the game and say, all right, we're not going to worry about the time. We are just going to focus on how many fish we can get. We're going to go as slow as we can, and we're going to try and be able to shift our weight to get as many fish as we can. I'll set incremental goals for individuals. So we'll get 13 fish today, and then next time we'll do 14. Or I'll have them do the same thing over and over to see if we can get the same score over and over. This will promote achievable goals and the small wins, which are very important. And it allows for a lot of flexibility with what we do. You can focus on a lot of different tasks with all of the aspects of the different games. I like to think of it as, you know, practicing a sport. You're not just going to go out and scrimmage the entire time when you're practicing. You're going to break it down into different drills to work on different aspects of your game. With my role as the administrator, I am trying to support the user with everything that they need. Active feedback is incredibly important with the KoreBalance. There is a lot going on. You have to manage your feet and the screen and your belt and your handles. There's a lot going on, so you need someone there to help you out. Users need guidance on selecting these games. The Tux Racer, as I said, is very popular, but there's a lot going on there. A lot of people will get confused or focused on one thing. They don't really know what's going on. They need someone there to kind of redirect them. Results from the static and dynamic tests will not match up to a specific game. When you take the test, that is all that it gives you. It will not tell you these games are going to help with what you need help with. It is up to the administrator to kind of figure these things out for the individual. Furthermore, there is no ranking of difficulty. It's up to the admin to, you know, say, oh, you know what, you might not be ready for this game, or we're ready for this game instead of this other one. Other things that I have noticed, the observed like overcompensations where people will go onto their tiptoes, or they'll lean back onto their heels, or stick their butt out, or shift their weight drastically. Those tend to go away after a little bit on the KoreBalance, just in their natural days in general. They individuals will do these natural lifts. Individuals will do these natural, you know, going up on your heels or going onto your toes, because that's something that they learned when they were able to do those things. If you have someone that is of high fall risk going onto their toes, likely they are going to fall. And other key instruction things like having your arches aligned at a specific number. If you're off, then that's not going to give us a good reading, and therefore the game won't necessarily work. Factors that influence the user experience.
Sam, we had a question. What exercises do you do, or do you recommend, that would provide similar benefits as this system?
Good question. I would obviously say a lot of core work, but also practicing the tasks that these things might apply to in your real life. So, you know, maybe bending over, maybe reaching somewhere, maybe walking from side to side, and things like that. We will take more questions at the end, so you guys can save those for once we're finished. As I was saying, the factors influencing the user experience. Recognizing progress is incredibly important with the KoreBalance. Obviously, we're working with an older population. They are regressing. They're not able to do as many things as they could do anymore. So when you can, rely less on the handrails, or you're making these small gains within each of these games, it's important for them to know that they're taking steps forward. They're not falling backwards. This allows them to grow in confidence on the machine, and utterly, when they step off the machine, they are going to feel better about themselves, despite not even knowing what they've just done working out. So our user experiences, there are some bounding and confounding factors. As I said earlier, there's a lot to keep track of. You need that active feedback with the belt, the handrails, the foot placement. A lot of games will start at level 1, and every session you are going to restart back at level 1. Each session, if I do something with someone on Monday and they start at level 1, they're going to start on level 1 again on Friday. It does not keep data storage except for those baseline tests. As we saw earlier, the baseline tests will carry over and stay within the system, and we will use those in the future. But scores for individual games will not stay. The machine may appear very complex or overstimulating to bystanders. It's the first thing that you see when you walk in. And when you see either me or Jesse standing around the device and there's someone on there and they've got the penguin flying down the hill and they're flying back and forth, it's a little overstimulating. I completely get why someone might not want to get onto it, but it's really why we try and educate people on why it is good for you. You can use a variety of different clothing. Dr. Kaiser will kind of talk about that. We did a study on this. And sessions are oftentimes combined with the Meradyne Live oscillating plate. It is a platform that sort of circulates on your feet, and it releases a lot of joint and muscle tension. So the pros and cons of the device, as we said earlier, it is very engaging, very fun. People don't really notice that they're working out while they're on it. They're playing a game. And there's a lot of objective and active feedback coming from Jesse and I. We are guiding you right through everything. So you're kind of going through this with someone else to guide you. Cons are there can be a lot of frustration with that guidance. It's kind of hard to do on your own. That's why we do not allow anybody to use the device on their own without Jesse or I being there, because there's a lot of menus, there's a lot of things going on, and if you don't know the device, you might end up doing the same games over again that you might not be benefiting you that much, or you need to work on something else. From an administrative perspective, there is a lot going on. There's a lot of setup. It requires a lot of guidance and coaching. You have to really know the device inside and out and all of the things that work to give a lot of active feedback. So yeah, that is all for me. I'm going to pass it back to Dr. Kaiser to talk about our research.
Yes, thank you, Sam. And I'm just going to step in before I hand it off to Dr. Kaiser, but with the components that Sam was talking about with the different factors associated, utilizing the oscillating machine, are they just getting used to the games? Are they getting stronger? Is their balance actually improving? We have all of these emerging questions, ultimately wondering if their balance is improving. Are they experiencing true balance gains, or are they developing skills with the game itself? So there's a lot of factors and emerging questions that we have so far with our research. And next, I'm going to pass it along to Dr. Kaiser to expand upon that. Good afternoon. We have about a year ago started collecting some data with the participants over at the Senior Center. 3 major areas that we've looked at so far is starting to develop an understanding of kind of a user guidelines type of manual that we're starting to put together. So the first one was looking at whether someone should be wearing their shoes or not wearing their shoes during balance testing and on the KoreBalance. And that's informed by the fact that if you look at traditional balance testing measures that are occurring out in the field, either in clinical or subclinical populations, there's a variation in whether or not individuals are wearing shoes in those settings. We also looked at some health demographics and balance performance. And then we also looked at the balance scores among individuals compared with their Falls efficacy scores. So the first one, shoes on versus shoes off, we did this past spring, and the purpose was to see if wearing shoes changed their balance performance in those initial baseline balance testing examples that we showed from earlier, where they had the blue round circle where we have someone is standing in a bipedal stance, and you do that for 30 seconds with their eyes open and then 30 seconds with their eyes closed, and then the 30 seconds where it's dynamic and they're moving their feet around on the platform to follow the ball around in the circle. We had 28 participants complete that. They were randomly assigned to testing conditions. Everybody did the balance testing with their shoes on and with their shoes off, and they were randomized as to which one came first for them. And what we found is that footwear actually didn't change the results meaningfully. So ultimately, this is a good thing in practice, I think, in terms of making the user experience more accessible. You're not going to have to ask someone to take off their shoes and then do the testing that way. Someone can keep on the shoes that they're comfortable wearing and that they might be wearing on a daily basis in their home. One of the caveats here is that if we were to recommend to everybody who uses a KoreBalance, hey, you can leave their shoes on or their shoes off, it doesn't really make a huge difference. If they're going to leave their shoes on, they need to be appropriate footwear. And I point that out because one of our subjects was wearing heeled boots during the testing. And that is a heeled shoe in general is the number one no-no when it comes to fall risk in footwear. So if someone is going to keep their shoes on, especially if they wear orthotics, that would be important to keep their shoes on. If they're going to keep their shoes on, it needs to be an appropriate pair of footwear that is helpful for their balance and not harmful for their balance. We also took a look at chronic diagnoses and balance performance. So over the last year, we've been collecting data over and over again with all of these individuals who are doing their balance testing, the baseline testing on the KoreBalance. And the participants who do use the KoreBalance and sign off on our research have also completed intake paperwork at the senior center. So we have an idea of what medical diagnoses these individuals are coming in with. And so what we did is we pulled all of the balance testing that had already occurred and looked at what medical conditions or other demographic information is available on these individuals, including income level, living arrangements, their other financial information, like whether or not they're on any kind of assistance. And what we found is truly what we expected to find, which is that participants with some chronic health conditions, specifically heart disease, diabetes, and arthritis, exhibited poorer balance outcomes on the KoreBalance baseline testing than individuals with other health diagnoses or no health diagnoses at all. Also, not super surprisingly, we found that individuals who had a fibromyalgia diagnosis did moderately worse than someone who had no chronic health diagnoses. And then the last one that we looked at is Falls efficacy compared to balance scores. So the Falls Efficacy Scale looks at someone's confidence in their ability to complete activities of daily living without falling. And with this study, what we found is that there's not a significant link between balance and falls efficacy scores, meaning that we have kind of a mismatch in terms of the performance on the KoreBalance and someone's confidence that they are not going to fall. So that's interesting. And there's some curiosities there that we want to dive a little bit deeper into, because you would essentially, what that's saying is that individuals are not necessarily great at predicting their fall risk. And that could be a function of the location that we're at, because these are individuals who are members of a fitness facility. And if they're saying yes to our studies, then they're also interested in performing well in physical activity settings. And so it could be a function of the setting that we're in, or the health diagnoses. In any event, we are very interested in looking further into this one. In the future, what we are really interested in doing is comparing the KoreBalance baseline testing to other well-known balance assessments that are happening either in the field or in a clinical setting. We really want to know, how is the KoreBalance baseline balance testing stacking up against other tests that we've been doing for years. We also want to look at best practices with KoreBalance. Sam did a really great job of explaining what we are noticing anecdotally out in the field with the very, very important role of an administrator for tests. That is not obviously stated, I don't think, when you start with the KoreBalance machine. It looks like it is something that could be set up and you could just say, okay, ready, go, do this thing. And what we have noticed in this setting is that that is definitely not the case. There's a major gap between the balance scores, and then how do you move on from there in terms of choosing a game, progressing effectively through a game, knowing when to challenge yourself appropriately, and then when should you switch to a different game. Like one of the ones that was mentioned in the video is one that people kind of shy away from because it's really challenging. Well, it would make sense if at some point someone is progressing all the way up to the point where they can get to that challenging game and master it. And then the last one that we're looking at is expanding the validity and reliability research. Is this machine and the training really improving individuals' balance, or are they getting really good at these games? And they could be one and the same, but we really want to know in detail if that is the case. And the way that we do that is, this I think will speak to the question from earlier, and I can touch on that a little bit more. What we really need to do is some longitudinal research where we have a comparison in training modalities. So we take kind of like a traditional balance training modality that might be strength and flexibility based, versus this gamified KoreBalance games training, and look at over time, are we seeing relatively similar improvements in balance baseline testing from the games on the KoreBalance compared to traditional balance training methods. So if I want to go answer the question from earlier really quick, and that question was about what types of activities can be done off of the KoreBalance that replicate the training. Is that right? I'm going to go back to...
That's correct.
Okay, let me go back to I want to show you this again. So this platform on the bottom here, it moves, right? So where the subject's feet are standing, if you imagined that circle is imposed on this circle, And we have these 4 quadrants here. If you imagine that someone's feet are oriented right, like their arches are oriented right over that horizontal line, when the subject is moving, they are manipulating their weight so that the weight is distributed in each of those 4 quadrants. That's like really the basis of the training on this machine. So we have this individual standing there and can kind of move forward, backward, and side to side without having to move their feet into a different position. This is the purpose of the belt and the handrails, right? Because if you were start leaning really far to one side, like on this penguin game, where you're kind of downhill skiing, you're leaning really far to one side and then leaning far to the other side. If someone has difficulty with balance, then these are the safety measures that are in place. So to replicate something like that, I think you could do the same thing in the field. What you would need is a surface that is not stable if your subject can tolerate that. So a foam pad is used a lot out in the field for balance, like a square pad. A throw pillow is another option, or a towel folded up is another option, where someone can stand in a bipedal stance and hold on to a handrail or a countertop or something. And the mimicked movement would be distributing their weight into those 4 different quadrants and setting up some kind of practical experience where they might move forward and then backwards and then to the right and to the left. And the biggest challenge with that would be not knowing where their deficits are necessarily ahead of time. That is one thing I think this machine does really well, is when you get your results at the end, it will show you where the deficits in those 4 quadrants are and give you an idea of what should be worked on next. Does that answer that question well for whoever it was that was asking? I can't see my chat box, so you'll have to let me know what the next question is.
I don't see any additional questions. Let's see. And Victoria, did that answer your question?
Okay, what other questions do people have for us for the KoreBalance machine testing and training? Victoria, you were looking for more exercises to do. Can you tell me a little bit more about exercises that you're curious about? Okay, so if you were in like a class type of setting, a lot of times when we're doing, when you're doing balance exercises that are in a class, or even if you're just at home and you're trying to get better at balance, it's something we just call the flamingo stance, standing on one foot and seeing how long you can stay balanced on one foot versus the other foot. We're looking at ankle stability there, which is nice. And then the progression for that would be the amount of time. So if you start at, you can balance on one foot with for 10 seconds, and then your other foot you can do 12 seconds. Your goal would be to expand that amount of time over time as you practice. Some variations there would be going up on the toes and trying to balance on either starting with both feet and then going to one foot and then the other foot and expanding the amount of time. And then manipulating where the top of your body is in space also could be helpful. So if you imagine standing on one foot and doing kind of like an airplane motion where you bend forward and manipulate the top half of where your body weight is in relation to the bottom half of your body, that would be some specific exercises I could suggest that would work on the core, the trunk stability, and that ankle and foot stability.
I'm gonna jump in real quick. I'm Jessie. So you were looking at silver sneakers classes. Honestly, your chair yoga classes and your Tai Chi classes are gonna be your best bet for balance. And also, if you are in an area that teaches matter of balance, we teach exercise drills to do to help improve your balance. So that would be the other thing that you would need to do.
Thanks, Jessie. Jessie, while you're here, you may want to answer the next one. What are the best exercises for an elderly person to do to increase core strength and balance?
Tai Chi, Tai Chi, Tai Chi. I'm gonna, I've been teaching Tai Chi for 10 years and we stress how to maintain your balance, how to move, and we work on a lot of core exercises with that. So that will be your best thing to do. And the nice thing is with Tai Chi, you can do it at home. I teach a virtual class for free, or you can do it through Silver Sneakers.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I'm not seeing any. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody.
you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you all
Thank
so
you
much.
very much.